and drag him back to the ring and cover him, but he'd only get a 2 count because Desmond would kick out. Then Abyss would grab the barbed wire board and set up a superplex on top of it, but Desmond would fight back and he'd do a sunset flip into a powerbomb and would drive Abyss back first onto the barbed wire board. He'd go for the cover, but Abyss would kick out at 2. Abyss would also now be sporting a cut on his left arm. Then he'd grab a kendo stick and hit him over the head with it. He'd then go for a big swing, but Abyss would hit him with a shock treatment backbreaker. He'd cover him, but Desmond would kick out at 2 once again. And Abyss would look to send Desmond into the broken glass, but that was placed in the ring by him earlier, but Desmond would fight out of it. He then hit Abyss up behind with the kendo stick, or he'd hit him from behind with the kendo stick, and then Abyss would fall face first into the broken glass. He'd cover Abyss, but he'd kick out at 2. Then also Chelsea on the outside of the ring, they'd show her throughout this match for her reactions to certain parts of this, and she'd just hardly react to anything. And then so that that didn't work, I guess. Then Abyss would, or rather Desmond would then demand that she give him her purse. He'd open it up and look for the brass knuckles, but they were supposed to be in there, but they weren't. Then Chelsea would pull out the brass knuckles and she'd toss them to the Abyss. Abyss would then nail Desmond in the head with them and then hit him with a black hole slam. And then he'd cover him for the pin for the win. I thought this was all right. Given the storyline and everything, I thought this was a decent match. Not the best thing on the show, but far from the worst as well. At this point, watching this back, I'd probably say it's like, at this point all the way through, it won't be by the end of the show. It's like a spoiler, but at this point, I'd probably say it was like the third best match on the show. A step up from the last few matches for sure. So Abyss would win the Monsters Ball match, his own specialty match. 11 minutes, 45 seconds was the allotted time. 2.5 stars for me on that one. After the Monsters Ball, we'd have Christy Hemme backstage for the 4th time this evening with the TNA World Champion, Rob Van Dam, who's sporting a cool Iron Man-inspired singlet. I'm also at this point hoping that this is like the last interview on the show. I just think it's one of the problems with this pay-per-view is that there's just too much talking going on in between, whether it's, the 4 interviews that's been conducted up to this point, or Brother Ray's promo, or the Matt Morgan promo before his match. It's just been a bunch of talking. Now, granted, I'm not against a couple of interviews or, Brother Ray cutting a promo necessarily or anything like that, but this is just far too much for me, at least. I could understand interviewing the world champion, obviously, and I could probably see interviewing Hogan and Bischoff because they're the ones running the ship, per se. But the Hernandez interview didn't need to happen, and I wouldn't have even done the Matt Morgan promo before that match, and I just simply wouldn't have done the Matt Morgan and Hernandez match the way they ended up going with it, but I know this stuff is 10 years ago, so there's nothing you can do about it. But, this ultimately is a review, so these are my opinions. Christy would then ask RVD what's going through his mind heading into the title defense against Sting in the main event. RVD would say that it's a huge night for him. Not only does he have to win the match for him and remain the TNA World Champion, but he has to do so for all the TNA fans. It'd be a dark day if Sting won the belt. And he told Christy that he wasn't going to let Sting's games get in his mind. After what he did on Thursday, when he took the belt, stealing it and vandalizing it, he cares about that. And after hearing what Bischoff and Hogan said about Sting's agenda, RVD would say, so what? I don't care about Sting's agenda, I care about RVD's agenda, and Sting should too. Because here's what I'm going to do. One thing that's important to me is that I'm at my best. And guess what, Christy? Good news, I'm at my best. And that's bad news for everyone else. And tonight, it's bad news for Sting. You're right, Stinger. It's showtime, all right. It's the whole effing showtime. This was all right. It was pretty, plain. But, it was all right. I have nothing bad to say about it. So then next we'd have the singles match between Jay Lethal and AJ Styles. Ric Flair would be in AJ's corner. Before the match, we'd have the video package, and I'll say one thing. As cool as an AJ Styles Jay Lethal match may sound on paper, especially back in 2010, this program was basically between Ric Flair and Jay Lethal. This was also during AJ's Nature Boy phase, sporting a Ric Flair-like robe and everything, which I also thought was weird. Yeah, so you had like AJ as Ric Flair's protege, and then you have like Abyss as Hulk Hogan's protege, so, weird stuff. To start out, Styles and Lethal would lock up with neither man gaining the advantage, and then AJ would back Jay into the corner and would hit him with a chop. But then Jay Lethal would respond with a slap, and then AJ would trip and go to the outside to regroup. Then he'd get back in the ring, and they'd go collar and elbow. Then AJ would apply a side headlock into a snap mirror takedown. Then Lethal would wrap his legs around AJ's head, applying a head scissors. Then both guys would be back to their feet, and AJ would apply a side headlock once again. And Lethal this time would send him off the ropes, and AJ would drop kick him in the knee. He'd try to follow up on offense, but then Lethal would fire back with some punches and a big chop. Then AJ would hit a big chop of his own. Then there'd be a series of counters with Lethal getting the upper hand, hip tossing AJ, and then following up with a cartwheel into a drop kick. Good stuff there. Then there'd be a snap suplex from Lethal on Styles, who'd cover him but would only get a 2 count. Jay Lethal would actually get a fair amount of offense in on AJ in the early part of this match. Then a little later, Lethal would attempt to Irish whip AJ into the corner, but AJ would reverse that, but Lethal would float over, and AJ would crotch Lethal up on the top rope. Then AJ would be in control of the match until Lethal would hit a leg lariat and would go for the cover, but only get a 2 count. Mike Tenay would point out that AJ tried to turn the match in his favor, but every single time he did, Lethal would have a quick burst to turn it back around. Then AJ would send Lethal out of the ring, and with the referee distracted, Ric Flair would then begin to choke out Lethal with his suit jacket. Then back in the ring, AJ would apply a chin lock, keeping Jay Lethal grounded, and then Lethal would make it back to his feet, but AJ would stay in the attack. Jay Lethal would then fire back with hitting a springboard back elbow, and then both men would be down. They'd get back to their feet again. AJ would go for a front face lock, but Lethal would hit him with an atomic drop, followed up by a couple of running elbows. In the corner, he'd hit a leg lariat off the middle rope, and then Lethal would hit a moonsault off the middle rope onto AJ as well for the pin, but Styles would kick out at 2. Jay Lethal would then hit the Lethal combination, would get another 2 count, and then he'd look to hit the springboard. He'd look to go for a springboard, but then AJ would have it well scouted and would hold up Lethal. He'd get him up into a fireman's carry position, dropping him neck first across his knee. He'd go for the pin, but then Lethal would kick out at 2. Ric Flair would be upset with this count and would complain to referee Earl Hebner, and then after that, AJ would try to hit the discus lariat, but then Lethal would counter with a variation of a neck breaker, and would get a 2 count out of that as well. Then AJ Styles would thump Jay Lethal in the eye and would lock in the figure 4 leg lock, but Lethal would make it over to the ropes. AJ would then hit a brain buster on Jay Lethal, and he'd kick out of 2 once again. A lot of kickouts here. Then he'd go for the Styles Clash, but then Lethal would counter out of it and hit AJ with a dragon suplex. He'd go for the pin, and Flair would place AJ's foot on the bottom rope to break up the pin. Then after that, Ric Flair would get up on the apron to strike the official, but in the meantime, Jay Lethal would apply AJ Styles in the figure 4 leg lock of his own. AJ would then struggle for a bit, but then he'd make it over to the ropes for the break, and then Jay Lethal would hit a backbreaker on AJ and would go to the top and look for that Macho Man elbow, but he'd miss. Then AJ would hit him with the Pele kick, and he'd try to go to the top, but he'd sell the after effects of the damage to the knee from the figure 4, so he wouldn't be able to. Then he'd try to hit a springboard from the middle rope, but then Lethal would reverse it into a Northern Light suplex into a bridge for the pin, and would pick up the win off of that. Odd finish to an otherwise really good match. I really felt like this would have been a perfect time following this to give Jay Lethal a push and make him a star of the future for TNA, but after he got done with this program with AJ Flair and everyone, he'd just go back to competing in the X Division. Jay Lethal to me is probably one of the best wrestlers out there today to still never been in WWE. Something I don't know if we'll ever see at this point, but of course, he's still with Ring of Honor. He's one half of the World Tag Team Champions there right now. ROH is probably where he's done his best work, and he's had a ton of success there. AJ Styles, what can I really say about him? I mean, we know everything about him. He's been successful everywhere he's been. And he, too, is a current champion. He's the current Intercontinental Champion. But all in all, a really, really good match nonetheless. Jay Lethal would pick up the win. 17 minutes, 9 seconds. This would actually be the longest match of the night, too, if you could believe that. And 3.5 stars I gave that one. I enjoyed that one. Next, we'd have Mike Tenay say after the Styles and Lethal match, that they would be going backstage with Christy Hemme, but instead, all of a sudden, they cut to the rafters up top with Sting. Sting would then start out by saying, "Sorry, Mike, but I took a liberty. I sent Christy away because apparently I'm a dangerous man to be around. Tonight, I'm going to cover a lot of ground in my war against Hogan and Bischoff. When the Icon takes the world title from the Pond, Rob Van Dam, and when that happens, I'll remind you again, the veil's lifted off everyone's eyes around here. Some men want to rule the world. Some men want to make it a better place. And some men just want to watch it burn. Which man do you think I am, Robbie?" So then after that, we'd have a tag team match. It would be Beer Money, James Storm and Robert Roode versus Jeff Hardy and Mr. Anderson. Beforehand, we'd have a video package. Then we'd have Christy Hemme this time with Jeff Hardy and Mr. Anderson. Christy would ask both of them how they feel going into their tag team match as a new tag team against one of the more accomplished tag teams in Beer Money. Jeff would respond first by saying that he thinks they feel great. Beer Money talks about how one of his former tag partners used to carry him, and Jeff would say that no one carries Jeff Hardy. Mr. Anderson would then say that they have a bigger fish to fry and that they don't have a name. Every good tag team has a name. You know that even she knows that. So what do you get when you cross an enigma and an asshole? Jeff would suggest that they be called the charismatic assholes. Then Mr. Anderson would suggest being called the assholes of the night. Then Jeff would say the creatures of the assholes. Then Mr. Anderson would say no. Then he would suggest the enigmatic assholes, which Jeff would approve of, and then I guess that'd be the names they'd run with. Jeff Hardy and Mr. Anderson, the enigmatic assholes. Then they'd have the entrances. James Storm would ride down in the ring on the Boozer Cruiser. Anderson would do his introductions, which would be amazing. Then Jeff would make his entrance. And then the match would begin with Robert Roode and Mr. Anderson. There would be a "Let's Go Assholes" chant from the crowd. To start out, Roode would get Anderson with a drop toe hold and would tag in James Storm. He would try to keep Anderson grounded, but then Anderson would apply a hammerlock. Storm would go to tag Roode back in. Then Anderson would tag in Jeff Hardy. Beer Money would hit a double team on Jeff and an atomic drop from Roode into a Russian leg sweep from Storm. Roode would yell at Hardy and Anderson that they're a real tag team. Then Anderson and Hardy would hit a couple of double team moves on Beer Money. There was one point where Anderson would come off the ropes, and with the referee not paying attention, Robert Roode would pull the middle rope down, which would cause him to fall out of the ring to gain the advantage. Then Beer Money would be in control of the match. Mr. Anderson would, a little later, clothesline James Storm, and then both men would go down. Both guys in the ring would make the tag to their partners. Then Anderson and Hardy would come in. Hardy would take over by hitting a series of offensive moves. Then Anderson on the outside. Then with Anderson on the outside. Sorry, I got lost there for a second. Beer Money would begin to regain control. They'd hit one of their famous double team moves, that catapult DDT combination. Roode would then cover him, but Hardy would kick out. Then Roode would then place Jeff up on his feet, and then James Storm would look to hit the last call super kick, but then Anderson would pull him out of the ring, and then they begin the brawl. Jeff would then hit the twist of stunner. Yeah, I guess he was doing it at this point. He ended up doing that a lot more in WWE, in more recent years, but he did the twist of stunner here. And they'd go for the cover, but then James Storm would pull the referee out of the ring after he'd hit the Swanton bomb at Robert Roode. He'd go for the pin, and then James Storm would pull the referee out of the ring, breaking up the count. As he'd do so, he'd fall to the ground, which would then make the official believe it was Anderson that had pulled him out of the ring, playing possum. Then the referee would tell Anderson to go back to his corner, which is interesting because I've seen this in matches before, and I've seen matches get thrown out and result in a DQ for doing stuff like this in the past. While the ref and Anderson were on the outside, James Storm would drag Robert Roode over to the corner and would make the tag. Then Beer Money would take over again. I remember there's one point where Beer Money would hit a great move. Robert Roode would wheelbarrow Jeff into a code breaker from James Storm. Then Anderson would try to get back in the ring, and referee Slick Johnson would try to get him out of there. He'd be totally fired up at this point, too. Like, he was just super, super fired up at this point. Then Beer Money would continue to stay on offense. Eventually, Hardy would try to start a comeback. He'd attempt to hit the Whisper in the wind, but he'd miss. Robert Roode would get Jeff back up on his feet, and out of nowhere, Jeff would hit the Twist of Fate. Then both men would be down, and the crowd would be ready for it. And then Jeff would make the hot tag to Mr. Anderson, and then in comes Anderson and Storm.